There is nothing wrong with your radio. Do not attempt to adjust it or change the station. We are in control. We will control the frequency and amplitude modulation. We will control the super heterodyne matrix. We are in control, baby, so keep your hand off the knobs.
Take it away, boss.
Hello and welcome to episode number 3 of Mr. Haney's Truck. Tonight, I'm going to be having a long-awaited conversation with musician, producer, and artist PJ Norman. We'll talk a little bit about his music, but mostly about X-Files, conspiracies, lost civilizations. It's lively, fun, and loose, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's waste no more time and wander into the Eaten by Bears studio in the compound for a conversation with PJ Norman. All right, tonight's guest is PJ Norman, not only a friend of the compound, but a resident of the compound. He's an artist and producer whose methods include guitar programming, sound recording, acoustic feedback, audio collage, and the utilization of location recordings and sound concrete. Is that what it is?
Sound concrete, yeah.
Yes, explain that to me, please.
It's using found sound to create music. It was formed. It was back in Paris in the 50s, like Stockhausen and those guys. They sort of started doing all this stuff with found sound, and Messiaen and those guys were involved in it as well. That Paris Conservatoire.
Is this anything like the time you said you were walking through the industrial area of London? And there was the sounds.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
Tell that story. I actually kind of like that story.
So, I was living. It was in Hackney Wick. I was living in Hackney Wick, and it's like this old industrial neighbourhood, and there's like factories there. I can't remember what they're making. Like one of them's a donut factory, I think. And I was walking down the street, and a factory on either side of me, and both. You know how factories give off a hum. They got this kind of. This like resonant sound when you boil it all down, and as I walked through, the one on the left was a fifth higher than the one on the right, so it was forming a chord on the street, and so recording things like that and then using that as a sound source in order to create music.
Did you ever record that?
No, I didn't have my recorder with me.
That's why you should take a recorder everywhere you go.
That's exactly true.
Well, that was a while ago, too, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Before, the advent of stuff like easy record smartphones and shit.
It was, before smartphones, but you could get those portable sound recordings, but it was before the advent of any decent amount of money in my bank account. So.
Right. So what have you been doing in our country, besides mixing it up?
Well... Okay, yeah, I like a bunch of stuff. I came over here because of a young lady, and so I started off in her business because I was on her visa, in photography, but my background was music and radio. But, I started a record label back in London, and then I just kept that going whilst I was here, and we built that up like more in the last 5-6 years as a New York record label.
And you have a studio in Dumbo?
Yeah, that's where we're based.
So, and what is it? Still that same kind of music? The sound things, or is it more like music?
It's all sorts. I mean, the idea of the record label really was to set up a platform that. Well, I mean, what happened is my friend Carlson and we'd made a record back in about 2005, and we'd been signed to this little indie label, and they printed up all these records, and they then went bust before they distributed them. So we had these boxes and boxes of records, and we're like, okay, well, let's start a record label and see if we can get these things out. So that's how the record label started. And but then we're like, okay, now we've got this record label, we've got this distribution structure, we've got all this stuff to hand, and we've got all of our friends who can't get record deals, back when getting a record deal was actually like a thing,
right?
And then we set that up as like a platform for all of our friends to like get their stuff out and have a means to like get noticed for what they're doing and
friend sourcing as opposed to crowdsourcing
in a way. Yeah, and so we started putting out our friends' records as well, and really like, there was only 2 criteria. One is that it was like from within our our greater like scene, and,
right?
You know, and the other that it was all about collaboration. Like everybody was working on each other's projects. And,
right. And the label still exists.
Yeah, we're still going.
Oh, so you have a website?
100mrecords.com.
Okay, so maybe people can go take a look and listen. Are there any sound clips or anything?
Yeah, there's links up there to the SoundCloud, and we got a Spotify playlist which is like curated by the artists, and if you go, there's a store there, and you can listen to everything in the store as well.
Okay, cool. Now on to more important things.
Yeah,
the miniseries of the X-Files. Are you looking forward to it? Have you heard anything about it?
About the new one, no, but I did just recently watch the entire full series of all X-Files back to back. I think it was 180 episods, I think.
God.
It took me months. And sadly, I was just back in Europe, and I got to the very end of the very last film of the entire series. Right. And I didn't get to finish the film because I had to get on a flight, and by the time I arrived in the UK, it had expired. So I actually haven't seen the last 30 minutes of the entirety of X-Files.
Oh God!
But apart from that, I'm up to date. It's brilliant. Actually, it's like a wonderful analysis of the evolution of technology.
Well, I like the fact that a lot of the episodes are standalone. I mean, they have the arc, but a lot of them are just standalone. I think those are my favorite ones, like the one about the Wendigo, and there's one called House.
Oh, that's brilliant! Yeah,
which is the one they said it's
ghosts.
Only been. No. That's you're thinking of the one with Ed Asner and Lily Tomlin.
Could be.
It was Christmas.
Oh, that's right.
They were the Christmas ghosts.
Yeah.
This one was about. It took place in Pennsylvania, and there was like these really creepy, deformed adults. And it was so creepy that they only showed it once.
Right, I remember the one, yeah, and it was before they really mastered their prosthetics and makeup.
Right.
Makeup was
exactly.
Some of that early stuff was crazy. But just watching the size of mobile phones reduce, it's brilliant. It's like watching 30 years in fast time.
Right, exactly. There was something else I wanted to talk to you. Oh, conspiracies. I've been reading a lot. It's driving me nuts. Because I think we're both sort of the same. We have one foot in science and the other in weirdness.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that?
I would say
that we like weird, but we also like science.
Yeah,
I've been reading,
try and prove it.
There have been a lot, it seems, recently in various magazines on why people believe conspiracies. And there seems to be an overarching kind of thing where they lump, like, say, the 9/11 truthers and the crazy way out people.
Yeah.
With the idea that they're all like that. Oh, conspiracies. It's crazy to believe in conspiracies. It's like, there are conspiracies.
Oh, conspiracies are really very real. I mean, the funny thing, I mean, it's like, you look at aliens, right?
Right.
Now, out in, I don't know, Colorado somewhere, they've been developing stealth aircraft for decades. And there's actually you hear all these things about aliens and flying aircraft and all of that, but then you hear guys that come out and say, well, I actually work for disinformation bureaus that were part of the Air Force,
right,
putting out stories about UFOs to hide our actual stories of stealth aircraft,
right,
which itself might be a brilliant cover for actually covering for real aliens which are in Colorado.
It's a vicious circle.
Precisely. I mean, so long as the disinformation keeps everyone confused, the truth is obscured, right? So it's I don't know, it's pretty wrong, I think, to lump all conspiracists in conspiracy theorists in together. But
well, they also it's always the JFK assassination, as if that is such. People spend so much time and effort to try and make it seem that there was the lone gunman.
Right.
They say, well, people just can't understand that a crazy guy could take down the president of the United States. Well, it's like, no, it's because that's not the way it happened.
Well, yeah, I know, exactly, right. I mean, when you just look at all this stuff with JFK, it's
and they always,
crazy.
These articles, these conspiracy articles, there's always, the illustration is a picture of Oswald. Always.
Yeah.
It's always. And I just wonder, Why?
It wouldn't be George Bush Sr., would it?
Oh, no. I've been reading more and more stuff. And that's the other thing, speaking of we were talking about UFOs, there are people that were involved in these weird, in the 40s and 50s UFO incidents, whose names also come up in the assassination.
Right.
This guy, Fred Chrisman, who was an intelligence agent, and, God, I can't remember the other guy. Oh, Guy Bannister, who was a private detective, who figured into the assassination scenario. And he also was an intelligence officer back in the day who was on the UFO trail.
Right.
Who was put up in a disinformation. Mm-hmm. So, what was that?
That was Nico. Nico's my little dog. He's here sniffling around and eating things off the floor, probably.
Yeah, probably peanuts.
Oh, God.
So anyway, where were we? Talking about conspiracies.
Yeah, UFOs and the same guys involved with the assassinations.
Isn't that weird? That's a weird connection. It's just, I don't know.
Well, it all comes back to the cigarette smoking man, really, doesn't it?
I love him.
He's the best character.
He killed everybody.
He basically killed everybody.
That episode is genius, where he's writing his memoir.
Yeah, I know.
It's like he just killed everybody. I love that. I love that. It's such a brilliant thing.
And everyone thinks his story is so far-fetched. But at the end of the day, I actually believe... And I saw an interview with the guy that played him. What's his name? The Canadian.
He wasn't even a real actor. He was an acting teacher.
Something like that, yeah. Right? But he said at the time, actually, no, CSM is he's the real hero of the X-Files. And I was like, actually, that's kind of true. Because he's the one that's kept the human race safe for the last 50 years from alien invasion.
Oh.
And all the other conspiracies that he's been involved in.
Right, right.
Like killing presidents, that was just part of the sacrifice to save the human race. And he was the only person that understood it. And you only really get that by the end of it. But he's such a easy-to-hate character that you can't possibly give him credit.
Well, you never know. It seems like his allegiances shift. You know, like one time he's on the side of the righteous. On the other side, it looks like he's on the side of evil.
Right.
So, it's just really very bizarre.
Well, he's playing that middle ground, isn't he?
Yeah.
Probably like a lot of these guys.
Oh, and there was something else. God, I can't remember now. We were supposed to talk about something else, and I can't remember what it was.
I can't help it.
Did we? Oh, we didn't even talk about on air here. We didn't talk about Paris.
Paris, right?
You were over there.
Yeah. Well, I was in.
Well,
Europe
they're not
when
in
it
Paris,
happened.
but
Yeah.
how was the coverage over there? I mean, here it was wall to wall.
It was wall to wall there as well, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't want to get. I have a little part in the back of my brain which is like a conspiracy thing, you know, and it.
Oh
seemed
God,
to
you
me,
don't think it's a false flag, do you? There, some group came out.
Well,
when the bodies weren't even cold yet, and they were saying it was a false flag.
It's possible, isn't it? It's not the first time that somebody's invaded Poland to start a war, or
but we're talking the
killed
French
an archduke, or well, the French might not be anything to do with it. I mean, I'm not saying it is, but it did certainly motivate all of the militaries in Western Europe to start bombing Syria, which a lot of people will profit from, and a great deal of many people.
Hey, when you were back home in the UK, did you hang out with David Icke?
No, I didn't actually. But I am quite a fan of David Icke.
Do you also so you buy into that the royal family are reptilians?
Actually, no, I don't. I don't think they're reptilians, but I do think that they know the truth. The Queen once said something very, very funny. But it's not very often that she breaks character, but there is a quote of her saying once that there are greater dark forces at play here than Parliament.
Really?
And I can't remember what it was in reference to, but I remember thinking, oh my God, she knows about the aliens. but
that's because they are the aliens.
Could be.
And apparently most of Congress too, according to Icke.
Yeah. Well, I mean they're Germans, which is kind of the same thing in the UK.
And then we have, look, it's on but you can't see it here, but in the background, right over here, we have, is it Robert Greer? He's the guy that keeps taking alien implants out of people, but never letting anybody look at them. Okay. Did I see that? No. No. Just take my word for it. It's an alien implant.
It's not a ganglion. I love that. The
Oh,
International
God.
Scientific and Metaphysical Symposium. It's
Right.
not a real symposium. It's just it's a metaphysical one.
Yeah, right. This guy was I think this guy died recently, although I'm not sure. This is from 2003. It's the Alien and UFO channel on Roku.
There's an actual channel for that.
Yep.
How do I?
And I have it up as number 1, so when I turn it on, that's
It's programmed.
on the list. It's the first one on the list.
Just in case, you never know.
Yeah, because I love this stuff. You know, I mean, well, we talk about it all the time. You know, when you're in implant surgery,
Excellent.
10th implant removal. We talk about this when you're not gallivanting around the world being an international man of mystery. So what's the connection? You have both a UK and Switzerland connection. How does that work?
So my father is British, my mother is Swiss. My grandmother lives in Switzerland, and my family is in England. So like we've always been sort of in between, and now my wife is German and we live in New York. It's just even more complicated. That's pretty much the
Yeah, I know.
So I discovered only recently, last month, that my grandmother was Swiss German, and she was raised by a Romansh-speaking Swiss, which is the 4th language in Switzerland. There's only a few 100,000.
I don't even know what
speak it.
that is.
It's one of the oldest languages in Europe. It's the closest to original Latin,
Oh, really?
and it's like a mountain language in Central Alp region, and. So my Swiss German grandmother was raised by a Romansh speaker. My grandmother then raised my mother in French, and my mother then raised me in English. And out of the whole family, I'm the only person that speaks German, French, and English. So
Can anybody talk to anybody else in the family? Because they all speak different languages.
yeah, my brother and my father can't speak to my grandmother at all. My mother,
Because she's a revanchist?
she's because she speaks only German and French.
Oh.
and occasional Romansh. I think she still understands it, but yeah. So it's quite complicated. Yeah, we mostly don't understand each other.
That's actually pretty funny.
It makes for quieter family life.
It seems weird, though, because I always thought of Europe, of countries as being very insular and very homogenous.
Well, I think that's true in most countries, but not Switzerland. Switzerland's been the crossroads of Europe for millennia.
Right,
the Silk Road went through there. That's where all the there was a lot of different languages going on, and really the only thing that bonds the people of Switzerland is loyalty to the mountains more than the countries where the languages come from. So the Swiss French, they formed their identity by repelling the French from their territory, especially the Geneva.
Probably not very hard.
In Geneva, they have an entire festival just dedicated to that.
To kicking out the French?
Yeah, with apparently a cauldron of soup. That's what turned the tide.
I actually kind of like that. Cauldron of soup. How long have we been going here? 17 minutes. We still got time.
Excellent.
What else do we need to talk about? We talked about your music. Yeah, tell me more about your noise.
My noise.
Yeah.
Well, I do a lot of different things, music-wise. I mean,
You have some clips that I'll be able to insert later, right?
Yeah.
To give people an idea.
Yeah,
We'll put it in the show notes. And
Yeah, I'll
do an
give
intro and outro of some of it.
Totally. So you probably will have already heard something that I haven't given to him yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, well, I play in a bunch of different projects. This year we just released a record with my band, a 3-piece Glass Rifle. That's I don't know, sort of post-punky kind of sound. It's probably what I'm going to give you.
Oh, okay, cool.
Have given you.
Yeah.
The more sort of sound concrete side of things tends to be electronic stuff, and I've done a few different electronic projects.
Right.
That sort of play to that hand.
Your studio's in Dumbo, right?
It is, yeah.
Do you rent out studio time?
Yes, we can squeeze people in if anybody needs some time. Let me know
at reasonable rates.
I'm sure we could work something out.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you can hear this, but I'm doing my vaping. Is that what I'm doing?
I guess yeah. It's called vaping, right? Yeah, it's an electronic cigarette. I'm quite a fan. I'm quite impressed that you started.
Well, it's because my friend Arthur, who was on the first episode, He bought it for me. He was tired of listening to my smoker's hack.
Yeah, it does wake me up in the night.
And he said, hacking up bits of my unborn twin. So what else? There's all kinds of other stuff we can talk about here. We went through the conspiracies. We got Greer on in the background there.
I think there's some quite compelling evidence for alien existence. But
I don't buy into the abduction. Oh, here's the thing. Is that, you know who Jacques Vallée is? I think we may have talked about him. He was the technical advisor, Close Encounters of the Third Time. The Truffaut character was based on him.
Right.
He's a real guy. He's been involved in the UFO business, or whatever you want to call it, since the 50s. Mm-hmm. He was worked on Project Blue Book, the military's thing, under J. Allen Hynek. Well, he's got a bunch of books out, one called Messengers of Deception. And he traces historically, like you go back and you look at all old folklore of like fairies and wee people, the little people and stuff.
Yeah.
And the modern day alien abduction seems to
like correlate to these
right. It's like the modern day version of it, because
yeah.
like the fairies would kidnap people.
Oh, so you're not
and take them to fairyland.
You're not off with the elves, then. You're
right.
You're like on a different planet.
He says it parallels the same kind of thing.
Well, you can look at like old artworks and old reports, if you like, in historical accounts of flying spaceships and battles in the air and that sort of thing. And,
well, that's what they say about Ezekiel, the wheel of fire.
Right. And
you
just
know,
look
from
at
the Bible.
And you look at the old Vedic scriptures, and it sounds like an apocalyptic war with nuclear weapons and flying machines, and you know that's stuff that's like 5,000 to 10,000 years old, which brings me to Egypt.
Oh God, are you a big Graham Hancock fan? Do you know who he is?
Is he the guy that did worked out the alignments? No.
Maybe. He's British. And he's written a bunch of books on alternative history of Egypt. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think he may be onto something is how virulent the hatred of him is by mainstream archaeologists. You know, right. He could be way out there, but the stuff, I mean, not knowing anything about archaeology, he doesn't claim to be a scientist. He claims to be a journalist. Right. And these are his theories.
Oh, I do know this guy. He's often a talking head on Ancient Aliens, isn't he?
Probably, yeah.
And I imagine he says yes a lot, because that's what ancient alien theorists do.
No, he's really good, but they hate him, you know. And I heard him talk about it, and it kind of made sense that archaeology is all based on theory, on what's the word I'm trying to think of? It's all based on interpretation.
Right.
Because they don't know. They can get all this evidence and they can say, this is what we think it means.
Yeah.
And if somebody says they think it means something else, oh, no, those would be... I'm an archaeologist.
Well, I find it kind of absurd that they say that Egypt is only 5,000 years old, because there's geological proof that it isn't, you know. The back of the Sphinx, for example.
Water erosion.
The water erosion on the Sphinx, clearly predates the last ice age. So that's pretty compelling evidence that there was a society advanced enough to carve a massive sculpture of probably a lion, because they've resculpted the head of the Egyptian. Right. But, you know, on such a scale, 12,000 years ago. You know,
more and more I'm coming to the idea that there was a civilization before ours.
There's a global civilization. There's no question.
You know, and Hancock says that I think he has a new book out now that talks about these extinction events, right? Of like these gigantic floods, and apparently the floods did happen.
Oh, there's geological evidence
that the floods happened, and one of the big places was North America.
I don't see why he gets the credit for the flood, but
but no, it's just the idea that. He's, you know, collected all this information. Mm-hmm. You know, he didn't discover it all by himself. I mean, he's a journalist. Yeah. At least that's what he calls himself. And
here's a bunch of facts, and it contradicts what you say. Sorry.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You know, it's sort of like I just read this thing today. It was in the New Yorker about science. And what the hell's the name of it? Let me see if I can look it up.
Wait, did it say that science says vegans are right?
No, it says that you're still stupid. It's by Adam Gopnik. It's called Spooked. What do we learn about science? Oh, I can't see it here. I can't read without my glasses. What do we learn about science from a controversy in physics? And it's all about how scientists are fallible human beings, and how some look at scientists sort of like as he doesn't exactly say the word as a priesthood. Because science, we have to listen to him. If it doesn't, scientist doesn't believe it. And it's all about quantum physics, the whole notion of quantum, which I've heard that if you think you understand quantum physics, you don't.
Well, yeah, that's basically it, isn't it? I mean, at that level, once you're observing a test, you're actually influencing the test by your own observations. So, is that even science anymore? It seems that seems almost like Buddhist theory.
Yeah, well, he goes into it here about Einstein's spooky action at a distance, and it turns out yes, it is true.
Yeah,
it does exist, and for years, physicists fought that because it went against the laws, quote unquote, laws of physics.
Right.
And it's like, was it?
Well, this is just laws. All laws are just man-made things that we agree on. It's just consensus opinion, isn't it?
Sort of like what was yesterday's magic is today's science.
Yeah.
And who was it? Oh.
And what was illegal
Planck?
In the 50s is now legal.
Right. Max Planck said science advances one funeral at a time.
Oh, he's one of my heroes.
I actually kind of like that.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
But getting back to the separate civilization.
Yeah, prehistoric.
Apparently, at the time of one cataclysmic flood, it matches up historically, date-wise, with when Plato said Atlantis was destroyed.
Which would cause, theoretically, a wave of such significant size. There's is it Pumapunku in Peru? There's this plateau up in the Andes. I can't remember. I think it's
Machu Picchu?
No, but it's that sort of. It's higher actually. It's above the tree line, where there is the archaeological remains of a great structure that would have rivaled something like the Egyptian pyramids. I mean, these are basically huge blocks in a sort of H shape. The
monoliths, not monoliths, but what it's called, like Stonehenge. What's Stonehenge called?
Oh, I don't know.
Not a monolith, but a
neolith.
Oh, I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
So this thing is thousands of meters up in altitude at the top of the mountain range. These blocks are the size of a large size family car.
Right.
And they would have constructed something that was several hundred meters high. And they looked at how these things, because it had collapsed, and these blocks had been sprayed all over the place, and they looked at trying to explain, when they put it all back together and built this thing, how it looked like it would be built, and then try to explain how these things could have been laid out the way they were. The only explanation they had was that they had been submerged by water.
Oh.
But this is at 4,000 meters up.
Right.
So what wave comes along and hits these things at such a velocity, at such an altitude,
right,
that can cause that? I mean, if it isn't a massive global cataclysmic event that causes a huge
right, have they dated it? Do they have an idea when it was?
Yeah, roughly it coincides with before the last ice age.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, there's Göbekli Tepe. It's in Turkey.
Göbekli Tepe,
something like that. Now that's another thing that predates these structures. God, I can't think of the term for it.
Isn't it Neolithic?
Not Neolithic. Megaliths, I don't know.
Megaliths, yeah.
But like Stonehenge and stuff like that. And in this
megalithic,
they found out that this predates by 5,000-10,000 years before those and the explanation up until this point has been the Sumerians got up one morning and went, hey, I have an idea, let's build this. And then they all of a sudden knew how to do it.
Yeah.
After they got done inventing farming and the wheel and the first written language.
Yeah.
And that was basically their...
Which is utterly ridiculous. I mean, actually, if you look at the old Sumerian texts, they talk about being created by a master race that was mining the tip of South Africa for large amounts of gold.
The Anunnaki?
The Anunnaki. But that's Zechariah Sitchin's translation.
Yeah.
But then...
heard there's a lot of problems with his stuff.
That's because he's done a lot of it intuitively and doesn't have a formal degree in those kind of languages. So very formal.
It's his interpretation of what it means.
Yeah, formal scholars will object to it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, there's no question that in South Africa there are ancient mines that just happen to be dated back to pre the last ice age, like about 10, 12,000 years ago, that are possibly a mile deep and happen to be cut with laser precision. Very similar to, I don't know, the Egyptian pyramids. Right. And other great structures like that tend to be around 10,000 years old. So there's a lot of well, you can't call it proof, compelling
evidence,
evidential.
Because ever since I was a kid, I always thought, before I read any of this kind of stuff, I always wondered if there was something before us. Well, I don't know why.
There's a thought experiment that basically says it's ridiculous to think otherwise. The Earth has been habitable for billions of years.
Right.
And the human race, according to our records, has been here as a civilization. Let's just talk about civilizations, not just species. Civilization for between 5 and 20,000 years, give or take. Which is a very, very small percentage of the amount of time that this planet has been habitable. But this solar system has been around for billions of years longer than this planet has been habitable. And some of the planets in this solar system might well have been habitable during that time.
Right.
So the amount of civilizations that could have formed in this solar system in the duration of its life is absurdly larger than one. So,
right.
Now, the number of star systems that have planetary systems in them that could be habitable in a galaxy with billions of stars.
Billions and billions.
If you were to say that there's only one habitable thing, one habitable planet, one civilization that could exist
could have ever existed
in the entire existence of this galaxy, that's ridiculous. And then, how many galaxies are there in the universe?
6.
Even if there were 6, the number of possible civilizations runs into the billions of billions. So it's ridiculous to think that there isn't a more advanced civilization within 10 light years of us right now.
Right.
That even like regular mainstream physicists would take that view these days.
Okay.
And everybody else that disagrees needs to get with the times.
That's right. And I just read the hobbits, different species.
Really?
They finally have they used the teeth. They analyzed the teeth and they found out that they were Homo sapiens, not Homo erectus. They're a different species. They're sort of a parallel species.
Interesting.
So I just read that today too.
Well, so I wonder which aliens genetically modified them then.
I don't know. And okay, Hollow Earth theory. Did the Nazis build a base in Antarctica to try to find the entrance to the Hollow Earth? And did they send a expedition to try and find Shangri-La?
Well,
actually, they did, but that was the cover story, actually.
Or Shambala.
Shambala, yeah, right.
Which, I guess it's the same thing.
The Three Dog Night song.
Well, they definitely sent a whole load of Nazi expeditions into the Himalayas. Shambhala or Shangri-La was probably a small province or some part of Tibet where there were very advanced thinkers.
Right. But it was also, it had some strategic importance, too. I just read.
Interesting.
But it was on a skeptic site trying to debunk, because this guy said the History Channel is stupid because it has all this weird shit like Nazis and the occult, and I'm like, it's a well-known fact that not necessarily Hitler, but his people around him, Himmler and everybody, were all totally into the occult. The goddamn swastika. I mean,
which
the spear of destiny.
But they were trying to design technology based on Vedic scriptures. I mean, Vedic flying machines and rockets and these sort of things. They were. There's blueprints that are based off of these.
Well,
things
that was the Bell Project, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of his advisors was an occultist. I mean, that's quite
a bunch of them. All those the big guys were. There's a whole lot of them.
Yeah, there's very little question.
And I was just like. And it's also in this skeptic, I think it was Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, I'm not sure, or Skeptoid. This is a guy, for some reason, he was convicted of fraud, but yet and had to go to jail, but he still gets to have this skeptic website. But anyway, in it, he talked about, and this pseudoscience. They talk about Oak Island. That apparently was a reality show on one of the History channels. Mm-hmm. It's got all kinds of theories, like historically, all these legends that pirates buried their treasure there.
Okay.
So people have tried for centuries to try and find it. Mm-hmm. And he called it pseudoscience. And I'm like, no, what you're calling pseudoscience is folklore.
Right.
It's legends.
Yeah.
It's not pseudoscience. Sure, maybe it's not true, but it doesn't make it stupid. It's folklore. It's people. It's cultural folklore, and it really just kind of pisses me off. These, I'm really having a hard time with skeptics.
Coming from you, that's quite
I know
statement
because it's sort of like
skeptical about skepticism.
Yeah. I wanted to write a blog one time called The Anti-Skeptic. Yeah, because it's just that they're not really skeptics. These people that call themselves skeptics aren't skeptics. They're non-believers. A skeptic doesn't make a judgment. The amazing Randy. He said, he was asked a question one time, if you were shown positive, unconvertible truth that some weird paranormal thing was true, would you believe it? And he said, no. Because I will not believe things that can't possibly exist. Now, that's not a skeptic.
What? If you've just proven that it exists, he's going to say no because I don't believe it exists.
Yeah.
Well, that's just a non-believer.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, that's just just basic obstinatism.
I've argued with skeptics where I've said,
he's an obstinatist.
Maybe none of this is true. Maybe it's all nonsense. But wouldn't it be cool if it was? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what keeps me going. It's like, wouldn't it be cool? But these guys, they don't want it.
Well, what's the alternative to all of this? I mean, you've got
I think it challenges their atheist worldview, I think is what it is. Mm-hmm. I think, maybe I'm not the first person to think this, but an atheist, a lot of these, I would say majority of skeptics are atheists. Nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But I think that colors their worldview, because if for, let's say, ghosts or whatever, spirits of the dead did exist, that would challenge their whole worldview.
Right.
Because if there is no afterlife, they can't afford to have ghosts really exist. I
think the whole concept of afterlife is so ridiculous. There is no afterlife. There is no pre-life. There is only life. It does.
You're saying it's all one continuum.
Yes, I say it's all one continuum. I say we're all just parts of one continuum, and it's in constant flux and transition. But our existence never ceases, and it never starts. Just because we're not aware of its beginning or its end does not mean that it doesn't proceed or go back before, beyond our own awareness.
Right.
And our awareness might be finite, but it doesn't mean that it has an end. It's like there's 100% of information here, but I can only ever be aware of 20% of it at any one time.
Right.
The rest is entropy. That doesn't mean that when I get beyond 20%, that I just suddenly cease to exist. It means that I get to understand 21%, but I forget 1%.
Right. Right. Okay.
So it's just one single space-time continuum. That's
Well, the whole
in constant flux with
the whole thing that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Well, what happens to our energy when the body dies? I mean, it's got to go somewhere, doesn't
and
it?
it can't be created or destroyed. Precisely.
It just goes off somewhere. Goes to purgatory.
Well, I mean, there's many
I'm banking.
theories.
I'm banking on there's a purgatory because I don't. Because I can, I'm going to need purgatory.
You're going to need some time to reflect on whether you want to let in or not.
Yeah, right. I brought up a thing on one of my Facebook groups about. I said that let's say there's an afterlife. Let's say that it exists. That's the premise, Is it fair that people who don't believe in the afterlife should get an afterlife if there's an afterlife?
Right.
And we're not making any judgments. I mean, people brought up about whether you're good or bad. And I said nothing. It's just there's no morality involved in there's an afterlife, You spent your whole life not believing in an afterlife. Other people who did and maybe have made sacrifices or worked their life around this, towards this goal, why should you get the afterlife that they sacrificed for?
Well, actually,
it's not fair.
I would say, why have they sacrificed for an afterlife that they were going to get anyway?
Oh, there you go.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, at the end of the day, you can go through life. You can create yourself a shitty situation or a good situation,
right?
And it's in your own interest to create a better situation. And you know what? Especially if afterlife is for everyone, and afterlife is actually this life anyway, because it's still this one universe. I mean, that's the definition of universe.
Right. Well, I don't want this atheist non-believer. Let's say I go, it's my afterlife, and there is this schmuck. I don't want to have to be stuck with eternity for this idiot.
Well, you already are. That's the thing.
Well, that's depressing.
Yeah.
Well, we're assuming that the consciousness remains the same, and when it will probably, if there is such a thing as the quote-unquote continuum afterlife, it may manifest itself differently.
Yes.
We're assuming that our consciousness that we have now will continue, but maybe it'll just change form into something else or revert to its original essence.
I would suggest that it's already in its original essence at all times.
Really?
Yeah. That we're just not aware of it.
Well, that sounds good. All right, hey, we're done. We actually went over our half an hour.
Lovely.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for
give
having
information about your studio, your music, your website, all that kind of stuff. If people are interested.
Yeah, www.100mrecords.com. That's the record label, 100M Records.
Right.
There's pretty much links to everything there. Drop me an email if you want to get in touch. info@100M
and
Records.
maybe rent some studio space.
Yeah.
What do you have there? You have the full complement?
Full back line. It's basically a rehearsal room, but we've got a full back line. We've got recording in there. And
oh, cool.
I mean, we can multi-tracking. We've got full kit. Bass amps.
In Dumbo.
The lot.
All right, cool.
Come down between the bridges.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Well, that was fun. I'd like to thank PJ Norman, otherwise known as Spiny Norman, for taking the time out. And we had such a fun time. I think he'll be back occasionally just to shoot the shit about the weird stuff that we both like to talk about. Well, anyway, that's the end of the show for tonight. Next week, I have my guest is going to be a pro-GMO activist who has really become in the crosshairs of the anti-GMOs, and the stuff that they've been putting out on him on the interwebs is pretty crazy. It borders on psychotic. So anyway, that'll be next week's show, so I hope you tune in. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye-bye.